Hello and welcome to Down to the Tyre. This is my first episode of 2025, and with the first race weekend of the year very quickly approaching, it seems it's come around very fast considering how long we all thought winter break was. I thought it was time to throw some predictions out there into the world. And who better to join me in doing that than Fleur? Thanks for joining me.
Happy to be back.
Was going to say, second episode on Down to the Tyre now. I think you might be my first returning guest. So
Oh,
you've got that crown now.
I
Um,
love it.
I'm glad. And obviously, when we're talking about F1, we're going to focus mainly on the rookies, which any listeners will know is kind of my area of expertise. And I feel like you're pretty knowledgeable on it as well. And I know a lot of rookies that are in F1 this year will be ones you're really looking forward to seeing.
Yeah, I definitely, this is kind of like, this is my year, basically. This is everything last year, who cares? This year, this is my year because every single rookie that is now in F1, I have some sort of emotional attachment to from their like junior career, especially Ollie Behrman. He's the big one because he was like the first junior driver. I was like, I'm gonna be a fan of you. But yeah, I love all of them. I'm really excited to see all of them in F1, and I think it's a really good amount and mix as well, I'd say.
Absolutely. I was going to ask which one you were most looking forward to seeing, but I knew it would be Ollie Behrman. I'm not even going to ask. She'll mention it. It'll be fine. What do you think? Obviously, you started following him a good while ago now, I feel. What kind of drew you to for him to be the first kind of driver who's on the kind of pathway to F1, I guess, who you
It
decided,
was
I'm going to support you?
It was weird because it wasn't even Ollie that I was originally supporting. So I started watching the junior categories because Arthur Leclerc was racing in them. And obviously I was a Ferrari fan, a Charles fan, and I was like, oh, let's see what Arthur's doing. And at the time, Ollie was teammates with Arthur at Prema. So I was like, oh, and then I started just seeing like so much content about him and like a lot of like videos of him behind the scenes. And this happened with me in F1. I kind of found my driver through the behind the scenes content and their personality off track more than their personality on track. And then I was just also lucky that Ollie was a good driver. And then I think it was when he had his rookie F2 season, I was like, oh, he's going places. Oh, that's crazy. Like his F3 season was still also amazing, but like when you look at his like rookie F2 season, that was wild. For someone who wasn't even rookie of the year that year, it was wild.
I know, and I feel like as well it's really difficult because that F3 year he had was really good, but it's a difficult one because you never know how a driver is going to translate from having F3 success into F2 because they're so different. Obviously, a driver on the grid this year who did manage to translate that success is Bortoletto because he did the back to back, which obviously Piastri did, and now he's having success in F1. However, with Bortoletto, I'm a little bit worried because I don't trust that Sauber slash stake slash whatever it's called this year. In my head, it's already Audi. I've skipped ahead to 2026, but I'm like slightly worried about that car. How are you feeling about Bortoletto's F1 debut?
I know what you mean, and I feel the same way because, in a way, like stats on paper, he should be the most impressive rookie because he's the only one who's like moving up that actually won F2. He's the only one moving up that actually won F3, if I'm right. Um, so like he's the most impressive rookie on the grid, and yet he is in the worst car, which is really difficult. But I hope that. I don't know. It's so hard because it's hard not to read into the results, but I hope he's close to Hulkenberg. And as long as he can hold on to where Hulkenberg, wherever he is, then I think he should be okay. It's going to be difficult because he's not going to be scoring points. Like, realistically, chances are he's probably going to be last or second last most of the time. But at the same time, we saw that happen a lot with George Russell when Russell was at Williams. But because Mercedes had their eye on him, they saw despite how bad the car was, how well he was performing. And I do think you can outperform any bad car. And as long as he's like on par with his very, very experienced teammate and like doing well as regards to the really bad car, then I think he should be okay. But I'm also very nervous.
I completely agree. I think it's one of those things where you have to almost look beyond the results. I think the same will apply for Ollie, to be honest, being in that Haas. I think it's almost, as you said, comparing to the teammate, comparing to how much like both drivers are almost outperforming what the cars should be capable of. Because I think we know drivers like Hulkenberg, drivers like Ocon, they can probably like manage having a not so great car, and they will be able to, because of their experience, they'll be able to just naturally push it to beyond its limits, let's say. So if the rookies are managing to do that as well, then I think it will work out and people will see, as you said, like with Russell, see beyond the results on paper. What do you think how then that contrast? I know he's technically not a rookie, but I'm still considering Liam Lawson a rookie this year because it's his first full year of F1. How do you think that contrasts to a rookie like Liam Lawson who's stepping in absolutely, stepping into what people know is has been the best car on the grid. How do you think the perception around him will differ to rookies like Bortoleto and them?
I think in general, Liam Lawson is going into a very, very different environment than any of the other rookies because almost all of the other rookies are either the teams know they're going to be there to build the rookies up, or they know that the rookies, like the results aren't going to matter as much because the car is bad or whatever. Like, I mean, you have like Ollie, who's Ao Komatsu knows that he wants to go to Ferrari, so he's seeing it as a temporary role. Like, Gabriel Bortoleto is in the worst car, so there's those expectations. I mean, Mercedes have made it clear they care more about Kimi's development and stuff like that. Whereas Liam Lawson is literally going into the lion's den and the lions haven't eaten in 3 years. Like that's the vibe Red Bull give. And especially with like the team dynamics at the moment, with like staff, all the stuff that's left, Adrian Newey leaving. Red Bull are desperate for a good, clean season, much like the one they had in 2020, like three. And I fear, I fear Liam Lawson is in danger because also they have Isaac Hadjar in that RB. They have Yuki Tsunoda in that RB. They also have Arvid Lindblad, who now has enough super license points to race in F1. And yes, he's not 18, but because of Kimi Antonelli last year, they could apply for special dispensation for him. And in August, he will be 18. And then he can race in F1. So I kind of feel like I hope he does well for his sake. But I fear for his life because the second he performs badly consistently, or if he does, there are three drivers standing behind him waiting to take that seat, basically.
I completely agree. Speaking of Kimi Antonelli, do you think his rookie experience will be quite similar to Lawson's in the sense that while Mercedes might not be as much of a top team, like they're not the best car, he's still stepping into what it's kind of if you consider Mercedes and Williams in the same way as Red Bull and I wanted to say AlphaTauri then still. I really like my brain just was like AlphaTauri. I still can't call it V carb. I still can't. But yeah, if you look at kind of the dynamic, usually a rookie would be stepping into Williams, say for example, and then going to Mercedes. Obviously, Williams wanted to establish themselves as a team in their own right, and that's why they went for Carlos because they wanted two experienced drivers. But do you kind of think Kimi Antonelli might have a similar experience, albeit not quite as under as much scrutiny as Lawson? Because Mercedes, even though they're not the best car, they're still arguably one of the top four teams.
I think he will in terms of like outside pressure. He will be viewed in a similar way to Lawson because he is still in a top four car. But I think internally the dynamic is very different at Williams. I mean, Toto Wolff loves Kimi Antonelli like he's his son. Like the way Toto Wolff treats Kimi is actually crazy. The HR violations going on at Mercedes are diabolical. So I think and I mean, you listen to the way that they talk about Kimi and his progression and where they see him going. They clearly believe in him, but they want to give him the space. And I think this year, being the year before the regulations, gives him time to grow before he's in a like new regulation car where they're going to want to hit the ground running. But also the amount of time that Kimi has spent preparing for this seat, like there is a number of like kilometers he's done in past Mercedes cars. I can't remember it off the top of my head, but it's crazy. It's
Hmm.
actually like insane. So I think external pressure, yes, it will be the same. Internal pressure is a very different thing, and I don't think it will be nearly like even half as bad. Because also they don't really, outside of Valtteri Bottas, they don't really have a up and coming driver to put in that seat. Like they only have an experienced figure and they want a new generation driver.
Yeah, I feel like they're looking for someone who can kind of be at the team for as long as possible. And that's why they didn't go for someone like Albon or Alonso, the names that were kind of thrown around at the time that they had an empty seat. Even probably why they didn't consider signs, because I think they really wanted someone who could be the future of the team. So I think that gives Antonelli time because they're not expecting him to come in and win a world championship off the bat. They're looking long term. So I think that will change as he goes on through his career. Like the amount of maybe like internal pressure that he receives, I'm sure, down the line they will be expecting him to be on top form. But for now, I feel like that, yeah, as you said, like Toto loves him. And I feel like Red Bull's version of Andrea Kimi Antonelli is Isaac Hadjar, because I feel like Helmut Marko is like obsessed with Isaac Hadjar. How do you think his decarb debut's going to be? Do you think they will kind of allow him to have mistakes, even though they've got Arvid Lindblad kind of in the wings? Or do you think, even though Helmut Marko absolutely loves Isaac Hadjar, do you think if he doesn't perform, they will still have that ruthless energy to them?
I think I don't know, like I'm quite there are two trains of thought for me on this because in my head, like if I put myself in Helmut Marko's yappy little mindset, um, I either know that I'm probably not renewing Yuki Tsunoda's contract at the end of this year, so I know that that seat is Arvid Lindblad's, and I'm planning to have
Mm.
RB go back to being the team of juniors, what it is supposed to be, what they decided it was going to be, and it hasn't been for quite a while. Or I want the best rookie in that seat, and I just am ready to bin off Isaac Hadjar at a moment's notice. But I think they want it to be a team of rookies again because at the end of the day, they are the only top team at the moment who don't really seem to have a plan for their future after their lead driver leaves. And I think this has been a big thing with me since really Daniel Ricciardo left Red Bull. They've constantly just been trying to fill a gap and they haven't managed to. They thought they did with Sergio, and then the last few years he wasn't performing, and they've just been chucking drivers at that seat and hoping something sticks. And now it seems like they've actually gone, okay, well, let's put two rookies in this team, and then we can figure out which one of those will be the best. And then that driver can eventually move up. But they've had to put Liam Lawson in that seat, and they have to keep Yuki Tsunoda around for the moment. And I think that also translates into the like feeder series as well because Campos has become the home of Red Bull Juniors and you're automatically then comparing your juniors against each other in the same team, the most accurate comparison. So yeah, I think Isaac Hadjar is safe for at least this season. I do think they will give them a grace period because it's not they're not at like the main team, so you get a little bit of leeway. However, like if it comes to next year and Arvid is in that seat and Arvid outperforms Isaac, I could then see Isaac losing the seat.
Yeah, it's such a strange dynamic, and I agree with you that I think the dynamic is changing as well, the way that they're using that team. I think it's a really interesting one, and I feel like again, as you said, linking it to F2, I feel like that is like the dynamic that they have in F2 as well. Like the whole way down the ladder, Red Bull are kind of like changing the way they're going about things. I want to move on to speak about F2, but we've still got one rookie to speak about, and I feel like the reason he's not really come up in conversation yet is because I feel like he's a bit of a odd one out because he's stepping into Alpine. It's obviously Jack Doohan. I feel like obviously you've got the drivers who are stepping into the bigger teams, you've got the drivers who are stepping into the teams who are known to kind of be backmarkers. But with Jack Doohan, he's kind of stepping into the team that's quite unique. I feel like there's not really another team like Alpine because they're not, I wouldn't say they're like one of the worst teams, but they're not top four, obviously. So what do you think that's going to be like? And as well, because I feel like there's so much uncertainty around his seat with the likes of Colapinto kind of being mentioned and stuff. Do you think he's kind of going into it almost maybe with most pressure because I'd say arguably his seat is the most at risk out of all the rookies who are stepping up?
I think he has nothing to lose with this beginning of the season because from what we've seen from the outside, Flavio Briatore is looking for a reason to replace him with Franco Colapinto. Everything points towards that. The things he said points towards that. The new South American sponsors point towards that. The fact that they've signed him on for like a multi like Franco Colapinto for a multi-year reserve driver role. Who does that? Um, like all of these signs point towards also the fact that they have like five reserve drivers. You only do that if you know one of them is moving into your full-time seat. Like everything that has happened points towards Franco taking that seat mid-season if Jack doesn't perform. So if I was Jack, I would go into this season going, this may be my only chance in Formula One. I have literally nothing to lose. I might as well just go all out. But he comes in with extraordinary pressure because before the season even began, there are discussions about you losing your rookie seat, and that is brutal. Like that's actually like that's a new kind of pressure. Like of course there are discussions around Liam Lawson, of course there are discussions around Kimi Antonelli, but most of them assume that the driver is going to finish the season. Whereas there are discussions whether Jack will even get to do the first like six races in a 24 race like season. Like, oh my God, it's actually like yeah, it's crazy. So I feel really bad for Jack. I also think Alpine are kind of, I think they're in a better position than they were last year because the whole instability in the team has kind of settled down. They haven't had loads of people leaving. If anything, they've like kind of sorted out some of their big problems from last year, but we still don't know where they stand because they were still all over the place last season. So I think as long as he can keep with Pierre Gasly, maybe outperform Pierre occasionally, he'll be in good stead to keep the seat, but I also don't know what Flavio's put his like requirements as for him to keep that seat.
It's a difficult one, isn't it? And I don't know if you've seen the latest season of Drive to Survive yet, but there was a whole kind of section of the Carlos episode where he was, deciding where he was going to go, where Flavio was trying to get Carlos for that seat. So do you almost feel like, obviously, I assume Carlos was almost their first choice for that seat, and that was obviously before Colapinto, before anyone realised how good Colapinto was in F1 level. I feel like Colapinto I think has always been a bit underrated, but I think people really, as soon as he stepped into that F1 car, realised what he can do. But do you feel like almost Jack Doohan was, when they didn't get Carlos, Jack Doohan was almost the second choice anyway, and they weren't ever that sold on him. So as soon as they've seen someone else, they have gone to, like, they've started the ball rolling of replacing Jack Doohan straight away because of that.
In my eyes, Jack Doohan almost feels like Otmar Zafnauer's like last decision.
Mm.
Um, it kind of feels like he is of the Alpine of old with Esteban Ocon and all that, and Otmar Zafnauer. Like he feels like that side of Alpine. It is so very clear that he is not Flavio Briatore's choice for that seat, and I also think it came from a place of you can't pass over your own reserve drivers twice. Like you did it with Oscar Piastri, if you do it with Jack Doohan when you literally have no one for the seat, then why would any junior driver choose to be part of your reserve program, especially any talented junior driver? And like you need to be able to keep drivers in your reserve program and have good drivers there, you know? Otherwise, you're never going to have strong talents in your team from like a low level. So I think that definitely played a part probably in it as well. And they were like, oh, fine, we'll have Jack. And then they saw Franco and were like, oh, now I kind of want Franco. So I feel like that's kind of what happened. I don't think Flavio probably really ever wanted Jack.
No, because from the Netflix episode, Flavio really wanted Carlos. Like he was desperate to get Carlos. So I feel like to go from being that desperate to get one driver to being equally desperate to have Jack in the seat, like it just wasn't ever going to like it was clear that Carlos was choice number one. And Dylan was probably a bit of like a okay, we'll settle for you. I think that's almost one of the like new rookie lineups that I'm most excited to see because of the unpredictability of the whole thing. Like I just, as you said, I feel like he's maybe even under the most pressure out of all of them, which based on, you'd assume it was someone at a top team, but I feel like his seat, as we said, six races, it could not be his anymore. So we shall see. But yeah, now we mentioned F2 briefly earlier, but I feel like we should delve into that a little bit because obviously we know every single driver who's going to be in it. There's some familiar faces, not as many faces who've been in it for multiple years this year. There's quite a few rookies, quite a few people stepping up. You've got the likes of Bashir, who's been in it quite a while, but apart from that, a lot of drivers are in their first or second year. Just kind of off the bat, are there any drivers who, when you look at that lineup, you're most excited to see? Drivers who you think are going to have a really good year this year?
Lindblad, um, Browning, Boganovic and Mini are my like four to watch, I would say. I'd say there, and I'm gonna put Victor Martins here as well because I really want him to do well. I feel so bad for him. I want him to do well so badly. But those are like my five, which like Arvid, Browning, and Boganovic and Mini obviously all did very well in F3. They were all within that like top five mark in F3. I mean, like they showed the caliber of racing they have. I mean, like Browning has done really well at Macau before. Like they've all had very, very good pedigrees. Obviously, we've talked about Lindblad having now enough super license points. He won Formula Regional Oceania over the winter break. He was like, "Oh, I just need to be in the top three," and then dominantly won the entire series. He's crazy. So he is definitely probably my biggest one to watch. And then Victor Martins is coming into what his like third season in F2 now. And he said in like the pre-season media days that he views last year as non-existent. In his mind, this is his second season in Formula 2 because the team was so not there with the car. They had issue after issue. He views that year as a null year and he wants to win the championship this year. And I believe he can. I mean, we've seen time and time again, he was the rookie of the year in the year Ollie Behrman impressed so many people to the point of him getting an F1 seat, you know? Like he should be up there this year.
He's a strange one because I almost kind of forgot he was there till you mentioned him because, like, as you said, it's his third year. Last year was just nothing to write home about. His first year was really, really good. I guess it's almost like not the same as a Teo Porcher situation, but it's slightly similar to a Teo Porcher situation where he's in his third year. Everyone knows how good he is, and he just needs to win it. And that was what happened with Porcher. Obviously, he didn't end up getting any real F1 opportunities from that. With Victor Martins, and I believe as well as he cut ties with Alpine now as well, Victor
Yeah.
Martins.
Just before the beginning of the season, he announced, like just before the media days, they announced that they were parting ways.
I thought so. So just like, with that in mind, even if he does win it this year, what do you think there are any kind of F1 opportunities for him?
I don't think there are, and I think the third year of any driver's F2 campaign is really difficult because like it's an ongoing trend, right? If you win it in your rookie year, you're amazing, you're a generational talent, get you an F1 seat right now. If you win it in your second year, okay, that's impressive. How did you win it is important. In your third year, cool. Reserve driver, test driver, WEC has some seats open. Like that's kind of what ends up happening. And again, we saw it with Teo Porcher. We've seen it with Felipe Drugovich. Like we've seen it with drivers who don't win it in that first season. No matter how they win it in the next, like in their third year, they don't have the same respect as the drivers who win it in their rookie year. So I think even if Victor wins it this year, unless he wins it by winning every single race by 20 seconds, which I don't think is going to happen because the grid and the series in general has been so, so competitive last year and it will be again this year. I think he's kind of in a bit of a lost spot of what to do next. Like I don't really know what he'd do. Maybe go into WEC or maybe go into like a different series outside of the Formula One like ladder. But yeah, I don't see an F1 opportunity for him.
I also think this is the year of F2 where obviously Victor Martins was the F3 champion and he went into F2 with quite a lot of hype around him. Leto, I feel, was the same. I feel like this is the first year we've had in a while where the F3 champion has stepped up to F2. And yet there are probably about four or five drivers who are also rookies who have more excitement around them. Do you think that is just because Fornaroli didn't really have those high highs when he did win F3? It was a consistent season for him, but he didn't have any real big wow moments. Do you think that's why he's kind of slipping under the radar a little bit?
Absolutely. I think, I mean, I remember reading an article after Fornaroli won, which was like the most boring championship winner in F3 history. I was like, that is not the kind of headline you want when you are looking for an F1 seat in your career. Like, that is, I think that's the thing with F2 and F3. And I've said this so many times before, and I love to say it again. It is not about winning F2 or F3. It is about how you win it and your performance throughout the season. Because if you have those star-studded moments, I use Ollie Behrman as an excuse every day because he is one of the best examples of this. Um, he did not get Rookie of the Year in his rookie season. He finished like 15th in his second season, but he got pole with a broken steering wheel. He did the first clean sweep in F2 history. Like he had these moments which made you look at him and go, "Oh my God, that was incredible." Like he did so well in comparison to his very experienced teammate. Like those sort of moments make you look at a driver and go, "Oh my God," like Arvid Lindblad last season in F3. He didn't win it. I don't think he even finished in the top three in the end. I think he was like fourth or fifth, but he had such an impressive performance. He was one of the youngest drivers on the grid. I think he is the youngest driver on the F2 grid this year. That makes you look at him and go, wow, he's so talented. Fornaroli just being consistent throughout the F3 season and like winning the championship. I think it was without a single win, but I
Yeah,
don't
yeah,
quote me
yeah.
on
It
that.
was. It was.
Like winning a championship without ever winning a race is not the most impressive way to win a championship, especially like in F3 where people can look at it and go, "Oh, well, this person won four races, but because of the nature of F3, they came like fourth because it's so up and down, but those four race wins were so impressive." And I think that inconsistency in the feeder series and the volatility of it, like crashes, like reliability issues, mean that winning races and having impressive results are more important than consistency in the overall picture of your career. So yeah, I do think that's kind of why he's overlooked a lot.
I feel like the best way to do it is have consistency, like have enough consistency to win the championship, but also sprinkle those wow moments in throughout. And I think that's what Bortoletto did really well. I think that's why
Yes.
Bortoletto's had so much success when he, especially his F3 campaign, I feel that one stands. His F2 campaign was good, but I feel like his F3 campaign stands out a little bit more to me in the sense that I just really remember, obviously, as well, I think it's the fact that he came into F3 with not that much hype around him. Like people didn't really expect him to do well. So I think that feeds into it. But he really did just have some moments where you were like, wow, this guy's really good. But then he also, when he wasn't having those wow moments, he was still up there. He was still doing well. He just wasn't at the top. Whereas, as you said, Fornaroli didn't really have those big highs. He was just kind of always there or thereabouts. Like he got podiums and stuff, but never the top step. So for me personally, I do agree with you that rookies like Browning, rookies like Lindblad just stand out to me a little bit more. I think Bogdanovic and Mini. I mean, I've been watching them battle it out together since Freca, and Bogdanovic came out on top in Freca. He won that championship. But for me, since that in F3, I think Minis had the upper hand a little bit overall. Would you agree with that? Do you feel like they're in their F3 campaigns, Minis been more standout?
I will. I think it's been close and they do seem to go back and forth, but I think like overall, if you're looking at the entire performance from the series, I do think Mini seem to have the edge, but also most years they've been in the same car and this year they're not. So I think that's going to be an interesting change in dynamic. I mean, it's the first year in God knows how many years that Bogdanovic isn't going to be with Prema, which really makes for an interesting like move, especially when you think Prema weren't strong last year and High Tech really were. And he's with Browning, who's also very it's going to definitely be an interesting year.
Definitely. And I think him and Browning being teammates is quite an interesting one because I would say they are two of the strongest drivers stepping up to F2. And then they're also, they're going to be battling it out against each other within high tech as well. Do you think that is going to mean that high tech are going to have a really, really good year? Or do you think it's going to get a little bit messy with them battling each other? The classic teammate rivalry, they're crashing each other out and stuff. Which way do you think it's going to go?
I hope it gets messy because I love it when F2 is messy, but I think they'll be okay because a very like big part of it. I honestly think Campos is going to be more messy, calling it now. Um, I think this is going to be less messy because obviously Browning is Williams and Bogdanovic is Ferrari Driver Academy, so they're not trying to impress the same people. Of course, the results are really important, but they will have different expectations that have been given to them by their respective driver academies, and they're not fighting for the same opportunities in the same way. And I mean, for Luke as well, he's already going to be like reserve driving and probably driving in FP sessions. So he's like in a different kind of place than Bogdanovic, who's kind of like on that long list of Ferrari Driver Academy drivers. Whereas Campos, you've got Pepe Marti, who has something to prove after last
Mm.
season, and you have Arvid Lindblad, who wants to show Helmut Marko that he deserves that F1 seat because they are both Red Bull juniors and they are both fighting for the same opportunities. And Pepe Marti just witnessed one of his teammates go to F1. He does not want to see that happen again. So I think that's going to get like dramatic at some point in the season, or at least I hope it will.
Do you think the same will happen again though with Pepe Marti? Because I feel like it's a bit of a, for me, I get Frederick Vesti vibes because Vesti was always, always doing well, but Mercedes, he was in the academy, but he was never going to get a Mercedes seat. It was never going to
I
happen. Do you think Pepe's in the same boat?
I love Pepe Marti, and I wish this wasn't how I felt. But Helmut Marko yapping is something that you can listen to all day, and he never yaps about Pepe Marti, but he yaps about Arvid Lindblad like he's being paid to. Um, and like at the end of the day as well, I love Pepe Marti, but he hasn't had these stellar results that people expected from him. He hasn't had the stellar results in comparison to Arvid. He's older than Arvid. He's also doing uni on the side, which kind of gives the vibes of he's preparing for if things don't go his way. And obviously, I know that like Arvid is doing school, but that's because Arvid is 17. Um,
Yeah.
he's a child. But yeah, so I think I just feel like Red Bull have their eyes on Arvid a lot more than they have on Pepe, and it would take Pepe doing something insane this season to get that focus shifted onto him.
I agree. I feel like he's a driver who, if there wasn't someone like Arvid Lindblad on the way up, maybe it would be different. But I feel like no matter what, there's always a Red Bull Junior who is there ready to outperform him. But we'll see. Maybe he'll pull it out the bag. There's one final driver who I want to speak about, and that is Ritomo Miata, because I feel like he came into F2 with such high hopes. Obviously, he's won so many championships over in Japan. He's done so, so well there. I think everyone expected him to kind of come into F2 and have a really, really good year, but obviously last year didn't really happen for him. Do you think, obviously, he's with ART now instead of Rodin? Do you think this year is going to change? Do you think he is going to perform this year, or do you think it's kind of going to be the same?
I would like to see him perform this year. I think it's going to be slightly different because last year, if I remember correctly, he was also doing like other series alongside F2. It wasn't his primary focus, and because of having so many struggles in F2, he's now chosen to just do F2 this year. He's not doing anything else outside of it, which I think will be interesting because I think drivers underestimate sometimes how busy F2 can be, how like much work it can be and how much like stress it is in a weekend. So I think maybe he misjudged that slightly, and obviously, coming into your first season, it's difficult. But I think ART are a good team. He'll obviously be alongside Victor, who has so much experience in the series, has had success and has struggled in the series, has had both sides of it. So I think he's definitely an interesting one to watch because I think if he's focused on F2 and he's not doing anything else, could see him being up there.
I think it's an interesting one because in Japan, obviously, it's quite common to do things like Super GT and Super Formula at
Mm.
the same time. I think he won both of them in the same year as well. So I almost feel like he did both of those in the same year, won both. So he was like, well, that's that, to him, it's the norm to do multiple championships at the same time and have success across the board. Whereas F2 is, I feel like, as you said, it's just a different game entirely. And being on the F1 circuit and everything is very intense. So, yeah, I think he'll do better. I literally had predictions last year that he'd be like getting poles, getting wins. So maybe they'll just come true a year later. Who knows? I mean, if any of these predictions come true, I'll be happy. we'll have to see by the end of the year. But thank you so much for coming on the podcast, sharing your predictions. Just before we end, I'm going to ask you for one prediction that you think is just like outrageous, like something that's crazy. It can be F1 or F2, something that you want to happen. Manifest it.
Okay, I'm manifesting. I think Ollie is going to be the highest performing rookie in F1. Sorry, Kimi Antonelli and Liam Lawson.
I love that. Mine, and I don't, it's not rookie related, but I'm going to throw it out there. I think Carlos Sainz could win a race in the Williams.
I like
I
it. I
don't think,
like
I don't know if, I don't even know if I think it will happen, but I'm throwing it out to the universe
you're
to
putting it
see.
into the universe.
Exactly, exactly. Well, thank you so much for being a second time guest, Fleur. It's been great having you on. Do you want to just plug your socials where people can find you, etc.?
Absolutely. I'm checkered flag with Fleur on TikTok and on Instagram and on basically everything. So if you look on anything, I'm checkered flag with Fleur.
Perfect. Go and check out Fleur's content. I'll hopefully be back with more regular episodes now because I took a little break over the winter break. So yeah, see you on Down to the Tire soon. Thanks for listening.